So before we go on to talk about specific institutions, we've looked at the monarchy and the crown. And the crown is actually largely a symptom of a functioning class identity. It's actually a very complex symbol of where this country is on class. And it's about the fact that we have the symbolism of this class. But now I want to talk about distorted class identities and what happens with elite social closure. Now in 1945, we agreed as a country that we no longer had citizens who were beholden to a class of people who just identified as our representation. And we very fundamentally, by 1942, the welfare state was put in place because everybody was scared that we would stop throwing our kids into the blender of World War II and that we would lose. And what had to be resolved during this period was the way people had been treated when they came back from World War I. And we still wear the poppy today at tuppence paper flower because no provision was made for people who died for a country that didn't give a fuck about them. I won't wear a poppy because I know exactly what that poppy stands for, and it doesn't stand for respect for those people who died. It stands for the fact that we had to collect money for them. And by the middle of World War II, we had realised that people would not throw their children into the blender of this global conflict that we were part of. And we agreed that we would not be doing this again. And this was assumed to be settled, and the rule of law that I am discussing is an evolution from that. And we have evolved as a society from that. However, much of that settlement was delivered and powered by a class of social scientists and academics, many of whom stemmed at the LSE. Robert Skidelsky describes them as a class of academics and social scientists. And that has fostered itself within the Labour Party. Now, as a result of Friedrich Hayek and Margaret Thatcher bypassing institutions and establishing a policy-making culture, a very distorted class identity has reproduced. And you can go and test on Twitter. You can see it exposed because these people don't know to hide it. And you can go and watch Owen Jones, you can talk to Sonny Handel, you can talk to Gabby Hinsliff, you can talk to any single Guardian journalist, and they will tell you that they truly believe that the class system in this country means that democratic enfranchisement doesn't matter at all. Polly Toynbee does not believe in this country that democratic enfranchisement impacts her. She believes, genuinely, to the truly bottom of her heart, that we live in a country where the poor audition to her for pity. And that's why they just tried to help facilitate the welfare state being rolled back. And much of the instability that we are now dealing with is about their class identity that was never addressed, that they did not understand was addressed in 1945. And one of the reasons that Labour have used young men like Liam Madigan to create a violent wall around politics is the same reason as they have been using abuse. Like, you know, Labour media cultures have actually been using intimidation, threats and violence to women in the last 8 years to maintain a false legacy identity. You ask Ash Sarkar or the brats around Novara, they genuinely believe that this is the case. Now the problem is that the rule of law that I am talking about will take precedence, and we're going to go through these crises in the next. I'm going to go through different institutions in the rest of this playlist. But currently, as it stands, for equality legislation to apply to me, equality legislation that was passed in 2010, the Guardian would have to not exist. There would have to be a fundamental culture change at the LSE, where I'm also alumni now. And the Labour Party would have to abandon their identity, it turns out. And they don't want to do that. So what they've been doing for the last 8 years is abusing people to try and facilitate the welfare state being rolled back. This is nothing more than a dysfunctional class identity that's re-emerged as a fluke of media democracy. And all the institutional breakdown that I'm talking about in the next playlist, we should have solutions. We shouldn't be learning about these systems through breakdown and crisis, as we're going to. We still will, the outcome's the same. All these systems will end up the same shape as they always were. It's just that in the short term, this culture are on Twitter abusing anyone so that they can reproduce a class identity that they genuinely believed never went away. And so that's the process that we're going through now. All the institutions I'm talking about will be redefined, those duties will be consolidated, and we can't stop instability until we do. But right now, the primary barrier to that is the mediating class that emerged. And they'll show you how they do it any day on Twitter. You challenge that identity, they will show you. So while it's kind of useful to have them in a fishbowl demonstrating that, we're at an impasse. And the country could literally fall to all sorts because they will not accept that democracy happened. They do not understand that democracy means that they can be voted out or votes can be withheld. And they have never learned that violence and abuse of women is not an acceptable way to impose their authority. And that's why they've used Liam Madigan, and that's why they've upheld this trans stuff, and that's why The Guardian are saying that it's okay to commit attempted murder if you're trans. And they're saying it's okay that women are being threatened, because as long as women are being threatened and abused, we don't have to address their distorted class identity that's emerged, which is a delusion.